What truly happens when loyalty collides with destiny on a tower high above the sleeping castle? The air bites with cold, torches flicker against stone, and somewhere in the dark, two minds sharpen like blades. You probably won't survive this, but you'll understand it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm really curious, from which part of the world are you watching this video? Write your country in the comments. Let's see how far this little story has traveled. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the top of the astronomy tower, where silence has teeth. The stars seem to flinch as two figures face each other, one frail and wise, the other rigid and resigned. Dumbledore's eyes, bright as winter glass, meet Snape's with something unspoken, the kind of understanding that can only come from shared guilt. Below them, the castle sleeps, unaware that its fate is being decided in the space between a breath and a wand's flick. Somewhere, a student snores. Somewhere else, a ghost hums a lullaby written before magic had rules. You sense the irony. This tower, once built for watching the heavens, now witnesses a fall orchestrated not by gravity, but by duty. You might even chuckle softly, realizing that in history, towers rarely host good news. Ask the leaning one. It's been trying to escape its purpose for centuries. And while scholars debate whether loyalty is a virtue or a trap, you already see it's both. Tonight, it wears a black cloak and whispers apologies to the stars. A faint wind rises, curling around their robes as if time itself hesitates. The spell that will change everything is not cast yet, but you already feel its echo. The world holds its breath with you. You follow the trail backward into the dim corridors of choices already made, where every echo sounds like a regret trying to disguise itself as strategy. Snape walks through the dungeons of memory, each footstep soaked in old humiliation and reluctant ambition. He wasn't born a villain, just a boy who read too much and smiled too little. You can almost picture him in that dusty classroom, correcting a professor mid-lecture just to feel taller, because nothing fuels teenage rebellion like good grammar. Dumbledore saw that sharpness and thought he could guide it, polish it into something noble. Instead, he carved a blade. The great headmaster, once hailed as the century's most brilliant wizard, made a habit of adopting broken things, orphans, secrets, and, occasionally, moral paradoxes. There's a reason scholars still debate whether his mentorship was kindness or manipulation. It's the same reason nobody volunteers to play chess against him twice. Meanwhile, Snape's allegiance became a hall of mirrors. Death Eater, Spy, Savior, Monster. Titles shuffled faster than cards at a wizard casino. The quirky tidbit you might enjoy. During Voldemort's first rise, Snape's coded reports were rumored to include potion recipes as encryption, because nothing confuses dark wizards like Latin plant names. And so, loyalty became a potion itself, brewed with equal parts guilt, pride, and unspoken love. Dumbledore, ever the strategist, knew the cost of every move yet pressed on, trusting that even betrayal could be an act of mercy. You, watching from this strange, omniscient angle, feel the irony. The most dangerous spell here isn't Avada Kedavra, it's trust. And like most good magic, it demands a sacrifice before it grants understanding. The tower's shadow stretches long into the past, and you realize this duel didn't begin tonight. It's been years in the making, stitched together by promises no one wanted to keep. And while scholars debate whether loyalty is a virtue or a trap, you already see it's both. Tonight, it wears a black cloak and whispers apologies to the stars. A faint wind rises, curling around their robes as if time itself hesitates. The spell that will change everything is not cast yet, but you already feel its echo. The world holds its breath with you. You slip down through the spiral staircase and into the trembling heart of the castle, where breath meets stone and the night feels too still to be natural. There, beneath the tower's lip, a boy hides beneath an invisibility cloak that's done its job far too well. You crouch beside him, close enough to hear his heartbeat hammering through the fabric. Harry Potter, still too young to realize that the adults he idolizes are making decisions no child should have to witness. He grips the cloak so tightly you wonder if it's keeping him hidden or holding him together. Above, Snape and Dumbledore are silent for one eternal second. The air between them buzzes with old lessons and broken faith, like two violin strings tuned to the same grief. Harry doesn't see strategy or prophecy. He sees people, fragile, fallible, and afraid. Somewhere in the depths of Hogwarts, a clock ticks toward midnight, reminding everyone that fate apparently loves drama. You'd think the universe could learn subtlety by now, but no. It prefers thunderclaps, lightning, and slow-motion morality plays. There's a reason historians joke that timing is the first dark art. Wars, alliances, even duels tend to start 5 minutes after someone says, "Trust me." And right now, the boy beneath the cloak has no idea he's about to inherit not just a war, but the collective regret of 2 generations. A mainstream fact floats into your mind like a candle through fog. Historians estimate that medieval towers, much like this one, symbolized power precisely because of their visibility. What you see, you control. Dumbledore knows that too. That's why he chose the highest point for his fall. The quirky tidbit? Wizards once believed that a person's final words could be bottled, literally, stored in glass as truth serum for the afterlife. Maybe that's why Harry can't look away. Maybe he's hoping to catch one before it breaks. Above, the spell forms on Snape's lips, his eyes wet with the weight of an order he never wanted to obey. Harry flinches, not from the light, but from understanding, and for a moment, you flinch with him. It's not just the end of a headmaster, it's the end of childhood too. The wind rushes up the tower as if the castle itself gasps, and somewhere in the dark, a phoenix cries for both the living and the damned. And while scholars debate whether loyalty is a virtue or a trap, you already see it's both. Tonight, it wears a black cloak and whispers apologies to the stars. A faint wind rises, curling around their robes, as if time itself hesitates. The spell that will change everything is not cast yet, but you already feel its echo. The world holds its breath with you. You move through Dumbledore's memories like frost over glass, each surface reflecting brilliance and regret in equal measure. Before this night on the tower, before the plea and the flash of green, there was an old man who once believed wisdom could outwit death. The office you enter smells of lemon drops and parchment, a strange combination of sweetness and bureaucracy that only Dumbledore could make comforting. On his desk, notes in 12 languages describe plans that no sane person would call moral: horcruxes, alliances, decoys, double agents. You can almost hear him whisper that greater good speech he gave to no one but himself. It's the same speech every idealist crafts before history turns it into a footnote. Historians agree that behind every saint stands an exhausted liar, and Dumbledore's halo was polished by omission. You pause by the portrait of Ariana, the sister whose name he carried like a locked drawer in his heart. The mainstream fact slips in. In medieval Europe, alchemists often sought to turn base metals into gold as a metaphor for moral perfection. Dumbledore simply tried to do the same with people, and people are much worse conductors. His brilliance made him dangerous. He could convince even grief to wait its turn. As you trace his timeline backward, you find him meeting Grindelwald under the summer trees of Godric's Hollow, 2 young men sketching new worlds in chalk and arrogance. The dream was pure, the method wasn't. One argument, one explosion, one body too small to bear the weight of genius. And Dumbledore's first winter began. He never quite thawed. The quirky tidbit whispers from an old biography. He once experimented with magical snow that fell indoors, claiming it could cool anger during duels. The Ministry banned it after discovering it caused emotional confusion and mild existential dread. Fitting, really. Dumbledore never stopped testing the boundaries of emotion. He just moved the experiments to his conscience. You wonder if Snape's loyalty was his final spell of transmutation. Guilt turned into salvation, pain into plan. Scholars debate whether he knew the exact moment he would die. One theory says he timed it with the alignment of Mars, believing cosmic order would justify his choice. Another insists he simply let destiny have the last word because even he couldn't bear to choreograph his own death. You picture him standing at the tower rail earlier that evening, the wind in his beard, his wand a cane for both magic and remorse. He looks out at Hogwarts, not as a headmaster, but as a weary architect of too many lives. Below, the lake gleams like polished obsidian, the forbidden forest hums with ancient sleep, and the stars pretend not to watch. You feel him rehearsing that final moment, not out of fear, but precision. He wanted Snape to live, he wanted Harry to learn, and he wanted history to call it destiny rather than error. That's the trick of great men. They make their confessions look like strategy. A candle sputters beside his chair, the flame curving in the draft from a cracked window. You notice the tiniest gesture, his hand tightening around a silver ring, the same cursed one that sealed his fate. He doesn't flinch. Instead, he writes another letter to a boy who will never read it. Maybe that's his real legacy, the belief that words can survive their speakers. You step closer and catch his reflection in the glass of a memory vial. It's the first time you see him afraid, not of death, but of being misunderstood. He sighs, a sound like winter wind in a hollow pipe, and mutters something about mercy, the hardest kind of magic. By the time you return to the tower, the night feels heavier. You realize Dumbledore's long winter isn't over. It's inherited. Every student who walks these halls carries a piece of it, the quiet acceptance that brilliance and tragedy often share the same wand. Above, the snow begins to fall in slow, spiraling flakes that glow faintly blue. You can't tell if it's real or one of his leftover experiments, but it settles gently on the stones, as if the castle itself has decided to forgive him. Above, the spell forms on Snape's lips, his eyes wet with the weight of an order he never wanted to obey. Harry flinches, not from the light but from understanding, and for a moment you flinch with him. It's not just the end of a headmaster, it's the end of childhood too. The wind rushes up the tower as if the castle itself gasps, and somewhere, in the dark, a phoenix cries for both the living and the damned. And while scholars debate whether loyalty is a virtue or a trap, you already see it's both. Tonight, it wears a black cloak and whispers apologies to the stars. A faint wind rises, curling around their robes, as if time itself hesitates. The spell that will change everything is not cast yet, but you already feel its echo. The world holds its breath with you. You follow Snape into the dim corridors that smell of damp stone and unfinished apologies. He walks quickly, almost floating, the hem of his robes whispering like regret chasing after him. You can tell he has practiced this pace for years, the rhythm of a man late for everything except guilt. His office is cluttered, a shrine to contradiction. Potion vials labeled with perfect calligraphy beside cauldrons burned black by impatience. There's a teacup on his desk that hasn't known tea in a decade. He sits finally and exhales like it's a habit he's trying to break. You want to ask him why, out of all possible lives, he chose this one. Spy, traitor, savior, and the most unloved hero since history invented irony. But Snape doesn't answer. He stares into the fire and lets it speak for him, the flames flickering against his face like silent applause for a man who never took a bow. You realize that double agents don't pray to gods, they pray to consistency, to the fragile hope that the last betrayal will finally mean something. You lean closer and catch fragments of the ritual he repeats nightly, counting his failures like rosary beads, replaying Lily's laughter in the corner of his mind and whispering her name like it's both punishment and redemption. Historians love to categorize men like Snape, tragic, conflicted, morally gray. But none of those labels quite fit. He's less of a man and more of an equation that never balanced. A mainstream fact comes to mind. In World War II, real-life double agents like Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, successfully deceived both sides, feeding lies so convincing they accidentally became truth. Snape would have admired that. Deceit, to him, was just another branch of higher education. He even grades himself harshly on it. You find a notebook half hidden under a pile of essays. Inside, each lie is recorded, cross-referenced, and occasionally footnoted with necessary. It's both terrifying and impressive, the kind of bureaucracy that only guilt could invent. He remembers Dumbledore's plan like scripture. He doesn't question it, he only questions himself. Was he saving a boy or finishing a sentence that began with Lily's scream? Scholars argue about that endlessly, whether Snape's loyalty was love in disguise or obsession wearing polite shoes. The debate will outlive them all because the answer depends on how merciful you feel toward bitterness. The quirky tidbit that floats in. Ancient alchemists believed that mercury, the most unstable element, represented the soul's dual nature, fluid, reflective, and poisonous if handled without care. Snape would have laughed at that, probably while stirring mercury into something labeled, "Do not touch." He is mercury personified, impossible to pin down, deadly when provoked, and tragically beautiful when still. He takes out a vial, the memory you'll one day see swirl in silver, and stares into it as if time itself is a mirror that refuses to blink. "Lily," he says softly, though you know the word isn't for her anymore. It's for himself, for the boy who once thought love was a transaction that could erase shame. You might even smile grimly at the irony. He spent a lifetime brewing antidotes but could never find one for affection. Somewhere in the castle, a clock chimes, the same clock that will later mark Dumbledore's fall. Snape freezes. He knows what that sound means. Every hour after midnight is a confession. He stands, straightens his robes, and adjusts his sleeve like a man preparing for execution disguised as duty. You follow him through the halls, past portraits pretending to sleep and suits of armor that seem to look away. The torches dim as if out of respect or pity, you're not sure which. He pauses by the great hall and glances upward toward the tower. For a moment his face softens, and you can almost hear his thoughts. That mercy is heavier than cruelty. That silence is the truest form of love. Then he walks on, and the world exhales in his wake. You can't decide whether to mourn or admire him, so you do both. After all, Snape never wanted statues or songs. He wanted understanding, and that's rarer than forgiveness. By the time he disappears into the dark, you realize the double agent's prayer was never meant to be answered. It was meant to echo. You can't tell if it's real or one of his leftover experiments, but it settles gently on the stones, as if the castle itself has decided to forgive him. Above, the spell forms on Snape's lips, his eyes wet with the weight of an order he never wanted to obey. Harry flinches, not from the light, but from understanding, and for a moment you flinch with him. It's not just the end of a headmaster, it's the end of childhood too. The wind rushes up the tower as if the castle itself gasps, and somewhere in the dark, a phoenix cries for both the living and the damned. And while scholars debate whether loyalty is a virtue or a trap, you already see it's both. Tonight, it wears a black cloak and whispers apologies to the stars. A faint wind rises, curling around their robes as if time itself hesitates. The spell that will change everything is not cast yet, but you already feel its echo. The world holds its breath with you. You return to the tower, that cold edge of the world where sound feels afraid to exist. The sky above you is bruised with clouds, heavy enough to bow under their own secrets. Snape stands at one end of the battlement, still as a blade waiting to be drawn. Dumbledore faces him, wand lowered, as if surrender were just another form of command. The castle holds its breath. You realize you've entered one of those moments history will never stop misquoting. A duel where no one actually fights, yet everyone loses. There's no thunderclap, no explosion, just the low hum of inevitability. It's almost funny. After centuries of wizards perfecting spells that can shatter mountains, it's still silence that does the most damage. A faint flicker of torchlight dances between them, catching on Dumbledore's hand as it trembles, not from fear, but from fatigue. For all his genius, he's still human, still paying the price for trying to choreograph morality. Snape's jaw tightens, his eyes glossy with something unspoken. You imagine the thoughts fighting for space in his head: loyalty, mercy, love, disgust, the unbearable knowledge that he is about to become exactly what he despises. The mainstream historical fact that surfaces feels cruelly relevant. During the Renaissance, executioners were often required to dine with their condemned before the act to ensure no hatred lingered. The belief was that killing from duty rather than malice kept the soul balanced. You wonder if Dumbledore invented that custom just for this night. The quirky tidbit follows close behind. In the 14th century, a forgotten sect of monks claimed that a dying man's final breath carried fragments of divine truth, so they built glass orbs to trap the air of saints at the moment of death. They called them vials of absolution. If that myth were true, Hogwarts might be full of them, tiny bottles clinking softly in some hidden cupboard, each holding a final whisper like tonight's. Dumbledore lowers his wand completely now. His voice, when it comes, is soft, almost tender. "Severus, please." It's not a command. It's an absolution disguised as surrender. Snape flinches, the word "please" cutting deeper than any curse. For a split second, he hopes someone will interrupt. A ghost, a gust of wind, anything. But fate has always been a terrible conversationalist. You can sense the weight of his decision pressing down on the air like thunder about to confess. He raises his wand, and time collapses into a single heartbeat. You can almost hear the castle turn its head away. The light that follows isn't violent. It's gentle, almost beautiful, like the world's cruelest lullaby. When the spell leaves Snape's lips, it sounds less like death and more like release. The flash paints the stones pale green, and Dumbledore's face softens, not in pain, but in recognition. He knew this was coming. He wanted it to. His body arcs backward in a slow, theatrical grace, as if gravity were giving him a proper send-off. For all the tragedy, it's an oddly quiet moment. No screams, no thunder, just the soft brush of robes against stone and the echo of a man finally finishing a sentence that began decades ago. Snape lowers his wand immediately, shaking, not from triumph, but from nausea. He doesn't look down. You do, and for the first time, you notice that Dumbledore's fall isn't steep. It's serene, like he's sinking into the night rather than dying in it. Snape stands alone, the hero history will hate. He wants to scream, but the sound would feel disrespectful. He simply wipes his eyes, angrily, quickly, and disappears into the stairwell. Behind him, a single phoenix feather drifts upward through the wind, glowing faintly gold before vanishing. Somewhere below, Harry cries out in disbelief, the cloak slipping from his shoulders, innocence collapsing with it. You almost laugh at the bitter irony. If history were fair, this would be the end of evil. But no, history has deadlines, not morals. The open scholarly debate will rage for centuries. Was Snape Dumbledore's executioner, his savior, or his final student? Perhaps all three. You lean against the tower's edge, the night air biting your face, and think how strange it is that mercy and violence can share the same gesture. Down below, Dumbledore lies still, but even in death, he looks as though he's listening to something. Maybe the silence that follows forgiveness. You linger at the edge of the tower, staring down at the body that history will call wisdom's price tag. The wind feels colder now, sharper, as if the air itself has opinions. Below, Dumbledore's wand lies near his hand, half buried in moonlight. You've heard tales about this wand before. Elder, unbeatable, unpredictable, a piece of folklore that somehow turned into strategy. It's absurd, really. Even the most powerful object in the wizarding world couldn't save its owner from irony. Snape doesn't pick it up. He just looks at it for a second too long, like a man wondering whether touching it will make him a myth or a murderer. The wand seems to hum faintly, impatient to choose its next story. And isn't that always the way? Power hates silence. You follow the wand's invisible journey, through hands, through lies, through deaths. Wizards treat it like a prophecy with a handle. Dumbledore once joked that ownership of the Elder Wand was a bit like inheriting a cursed family heirloom, technically impressive, but guaranteed to ruin Christmas. A mainstream historical fact glows faintly in your mind. Medieval kings often claimed divine right not because they believed it, but because their subjects needed to. Dumbledore's wand worked the same way. Its power was never just in what it did, but in what others believed it could do. Snape, brilliant cynic that he is, knows this. He doesn't want the wand. He wants the illusion it carries to stay intact, the lie that Dumbledore was untouchable. It's the only way the plan holds. Still, there's something tragic about watching a man who's mastered deception now depend entirely on faith. You catch the faintest smirk on his lips before he turns away, muttering something about foolish old men and their dramatic timing. It's almost funny, in a morbid bedtime story kind of way. But the wand isn't done. It's almost alive now, its legacy stitching itself into the bones of the story. Scholars will debate for centuries whether it truly possessed will or whether humans simply needed an excuse for their worst decisions. The open debate never dies. Does the wand choose the wizard, or does the wizard project his hunger onto wood and legend? Some philosophers, usually the ones who can't cast a decent charm, argue that the wand merely reflects the wizard's nature, amplifying whatever madness is already brewing inside. Others claim it is sentient, as if all the dark choices ever made seeped into its grain and started whispering back. You imagine it whispering now, faintly, like a violin played underwater. Not words, just intent. Snape leaves the tower without claiming it, but destiny doesn't need consent. The wand knows the story has moved on, knows that Harry will one day stand in this same spot, wondering what all this sacrifice meant. The quirky tidbit that floats into your thoughts feels painfully relevant. In the 17th century, a philosopher named Athanasius Kircher tried to build a talking tube from a tree struck by lightning, believing the wood retained the voice of the storm. It failed, of course, but the idea survived, that powerful objects remember their masters. Perhaps the Elder Wand remembers every command ever given to it, and perhaps right now it's still humming Dumbledore's final plea. You drift with Snape through the corridors as he descends, his steps echoing like punctuation marks in a sentence that's finally ended. Each hallway feels longer than the last, each door slightly heavier. The portraits watch, pretending not to see. One of them, Phineas Nigellus, mutters something about a waste of pedigree, to which Snape, in an uncharacteristic act of restraint, doesn't respond. He just keeps walking, his face calm but hollow. You can sense what he's thinking, that the wand, that symbol of mastery and order, was never meant to save anyone. It was meant to keep men busy while the real war happened inside them. He reaches his office, the same place where, hours ago, he rehearsed the act. The fire is still burning, the tea still cold. He sits again, but this time he doesn't look at the flames. Instead, he stares at his hands, the same hands that carried out Dumbledore's mercy. They look ordinary, you might even say disappointingly human. If evil were measurable, his palms would glow. Instead, they're pale, trembling, and empty. He whispers something you almost miss. He trusted me, not as a boast, but as a lament, and then softer. I trusted him. You feel the world tilt slightly, as if those words realigned gravity. The camera of memory pans outward. The wand remains on the tower, untouched, soaking in the moonlight like it's charging. Below, the castle begins to wake, sensing the shift. Somewhere, Harry is still frozen by grief. Somewhere else, Voldemort feels a flicker of triumph he doesn't yet understand. And somewhere far beyond all of them, fate scratches one more line into its list of absurd ironies. The most powerful object in existence now belongs to no one. The Elder Wand rests beside its fallen master, humming softly to itself like an old god waiting for the next fool to kneel. Snape stands alone, the hero history will hate. He wants to scream, but the sound would feel disrespectful. He simply wipes his eyes, angrily, quickly, and disappears into the stairwell. Behind him, a single phoenix feather drifts upward through the wind, glowing faintly gold before vanishing. Somewhere below, Harry cries out in disbelief, the cloak slipping from his shoulders, innocence collapsing with it. You almost laugh at the bitter irony. If history were fair, this would be the end of evil. But no, history has deadlines, not morals. The open scholarly debate will rage for centuries. Was Snape Dumbledore's executioner, his savior, or his final student? Perhaps all three. You lean against the tower's edge, the night air biting your face, and think how strange it is that mercy and violence can share the same gesture. Down below, Dumbledore lies still, but even in death, he looks as though he's listening to something. Maybe the silence that follows forgiveness. You drift through the corridors long after the deed, moving like smoke through the veins of a sleeping beast. The castle has grown quieter, if that's possible. Every portrait, every ghost, every hinge seems to understand what has been taken from it. The torches burn low, their light shivering against stone, and you wonder whether the walls themselves will remember this night. They will, of course. Hogwarts remembers everything. It is not merely a building, but an organism, one that feeds on laughter and learns from loss. Somewhere in the distance, a clock tolls 3 times, a sound so ordinary it feels offensive. Dumbledore's absence is immediate, like a chord cut mid-note. You can almost hear the silence rearranging itself to fill the gap he left. Snape walks these same halls only minutes ahead of you, his pace uneven, his expression unreadable. He has fulfilled his promise and lost his purpose. There's a strange kind of tragedy in that. To win the war you were built for and realize you have no idea what peace looks like. The castle mourns in subtle ways. The staircases stop shifting for a while, perhaps out of respect. The Great Hall's ceiling mirrors a clouded sky, though it's clear outside. Fawkes, the phoenix, is gone. His song, which once filled these halls with melancholy beauty, now echoes faintly like a memory that refuses to fade. The mainstream historical fact comes to you quietly. Ancient Rome, after the death of a great general, would leave his armor displayed on an empty horse for 3 days, a symbol that power and loss are inseparable companions. Hogwarts seems to follow the same tradition. Dumbledore's office stands open, chair turned slightly toward the window, as though waiting for him to return. The quirky tidbit. Wizards of the 15th century believed grief could literally weigh the heart down, so much so that they invented levitation funerals, where mourners were suspended in midair to symbolize rising above sorrow. If that were true, the entire castle would be floating tonight. You follow McGonagall as she walks through the corridors at dawn, her eyes red but her posture unbroken. She doesn't cry, she doesn't have to. Her grief is disciplined, measured in silence and motion. She whispers to a suit of armor that still hasn't moved since midnight, and for a moment it bows its helmet slightly. Even enchanted metal understands loss better than some people. Down in the hospital wing, students begin to stir, unaware of the shift in history above their heads. Harry is there, half awake and fully broken, the cloak balled up in his fists. He can't process what he's seen. His face has the stillness of shock, the kind that turns memories into splinters. You can almost hear him replaying every moment, searching for a way to rewrite it. But that's the cruelest joke of all. Even in a world with time-turners, you can't edit grief. Snape, meanwhile, has retreated to the dungeons, where guilt finds perfect acoustics. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. Every flame in his chamber burns lower, as if avoiding eye contact. You imagine him sitting in his chair, unmoving, the echoes of pleas still hanging in the air. He thinks of Lily, of promises twisted into obligations, of how love somehow ended in killing Mercy. And still, somewhere inside him, a small voice insists that this was the right thing. He hates that voice most of all. It's the same one that once told him to join the Death Eaters, and the same one that made him turn back. It speaks in Dumbledore's tone now, soft, measured, maddeningly patient. You almost wish he'd shout, break something, cry anything, but Snape doesn't grant himself catharsis. His suffering is methodical, clean, an essay on the ethics of despair. Outside, the first sunlight crawls over the battlements, painting the world in soft gold. It's beautiful in that cruel way mornings often are, indifferent to what they reveal. You look down from the tower and see the place where Dumbledore fell. The groundskeepers have already cleared the stones, leaving no trace except a faint shimmer in the air, like magic refusing to fade. Some say the castle hums differently now, a lower vibration, as though mourning in its own frequency. The portraits in the headmaster's office begin to stir. Phineas Nigellus sighs dramatically. Dilys Derwent wipes her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief. The newest frame remains blank, a canvas waiting for Dumbledore's likeness to arrive. And you wonder what his first painted words will be. Probably something frustratingly calm, like, "It's all right, Minerva." The plan continues. The plan. Yes, that invisible script that orchestrated every heartbreak in the name of victory. You almost laugh at how human it all seems. The greatest wizard of his age builds an elaborate moral labyrinth, and it still ends with two tired men whispering apologies in the dark. The scholars who come later will analyze this moment endlessly, scribbling theories about intent, consequence, and ethical necessity. Some will call it a tragedy of virtue, others a masterclass in manipulation. The open scholarly debate never resolves, of course. It never does. You suspect that's the point. The story's ambiguity keeps it alive, like a fire that refuses to die because everyone keeps arguing about how it started. As dawn fully breaks, Harry walks alone by the lake, tracing ripples in the water that Dumbledore once enchanted to glow at sunrise. The reflection trembles but doesn't distort, just like truth. You sense something shift in him, not quite acceptance, but the fragile outline of purpose. This is how heroes begin, not with glory, but with the unbearable need to make sense of loss. He looks up at the tower one last time, the wind tugging at his robes, and whispers something you can't hear. Maybe it's a promise, maybe it's goodbye. Either way, the world moves forward, clumsily, stubbornly, as it always does. By the time the castle's bells ring for morning classes, Hogwarts has already rewritten its own legend. The students will talk about lightning strikes, curses, and betrayals. But the truth is simpler. One man died for a world that was too young to understand him, and another lived to keep his secret. The ashes settle gently over stone, soft as snow, and for a fleeting second, you swear the air smells faintly of phoenix feathers. Snape stands alone, the hero history will hate. He wants to scream, but the sound would feel disrespectful. He simply wipes his eyes, angrily, quickly, and disappears into the stairwell. Behind him, a single phoenix feather drifts upward through the wind, glowing faintly gold before vanishing. Somewhere below, Harry cries out in disbelief, the cloak slipping from his shoulders, innocence collapsing with it. You almost laugh at the bitter irony. If history were fair, this would be the end of evil. But no, history has deadlines, not morals. The open scholarly debate will rage for centuries. Was Snape Dumbledore's executioner, his savior, or his final student? Perhaps all three. You lean against the tower's edge, the night air biting your face, and think how strange it is that mercy and violence can share the same gesture. Down below, Dumbledore lies still, but even in death, he looks as though he's listening to something. Maybe the silence that follows forgiveness. You follow Harry into that final moment in the boathouse, where moonlight bends through broken glass and the water beneath him glows with reflections of fate. Snape lies crumpled against the wall, his breathing thin, his eyes glassy yet sharp. The war has finally found him, not through punishment, but inevitability. Nagini's bite still burns across his neck, the cruel poetry of betrayal completing its circle. You step closer, watching as Snape reaches for Harry, his hand shaking, his voice barely more than a whisper. Take them. The words fall like broken glass, fragile and necessary. You already know what's inside those tears before they even fall. The true story, the one that will unmake every myth and rebuild it with grief. Harry collects the memories in a trembling bottle, unaware that he's holding the entire emotional architecture of another man's life. Snape's eyes stay on him, unblinking, not with hatred, but longing. It's not forgiveness he wants, it's recognition. Look at me, he says. And when Harry does, for the first time in years, Snape sees Lily's eyes not as ghosts, but as absolution. It's almost unbearable in its simplicity, the universe reducing decades of conflict, love, and betrayal into one glance. And you realize, absurdly, that this is the most honest moment in the story. Not the duel, not the prophecy, not the tower. Just two broken people staring at the truth and wishing it had come sooner. When Snape's breathing slows, you half expect some dramatic revelation, a final curse, a whispered plot twist for scholars to argue over. But there's none. He dies the way he lived, quietly, inconveniently, without audience or applause. The mainstream historical fact echoes faintly. The philosopher Socrates claimed that death was merely a conversation between the soul and truth. Snape would have hated that. Too optimistic, too sentimental. He always preferred the kind of truth that didn't return the favor. The quirky tidbit comes next, uninvited. In the 18th century Europe, it was fashionable to preserve the final tears of the dying in glass pendants, believed to grant wisdom to whoever wore them. If that superstition were real, Harry is now holding a storm in a bottle. Later, in Dumbledore's office, the pensieve waits. The silver liquid swirls, heavy with memory. You watch as Harry leans over and plunges into the past, and suddenly you're falling too, through childhood cruelty, whispered vows, and corridors that smell of dust and desperation. You see Snape as a boy, awkward, hopeful, reaching toward Lily on the riverbank. You see him years later, cornered and bitter, muttering insults as shields. You see Dumbledore's request, no, his command, to kill him when the time comes. And you feel the weight of that deal finally make sense. Mercy disguised as murder. When Harry emerges from the pensieve, his face is wet, not just from tears, but from understanding. You realize he's no longer the boy under the cloak. He's inherited the unbearable clarity that comes with adulthood, the knowledge that good and evil are sometimes the same person seen from different sides of the war. And here's the open scholarly debate that refuses to die. Did Snape love Lily, or did he love the idea of redemption she represented? Some historians argue it was pure devotion, the kind of loyalty that rewrites destiny. Others claim it was obsession sanctified by guilt, proof that even love can rot if left unspoken too long. Maybe both are true. You can sense the ghost of Dumbledore somewhere in the room, amused that even in death he's still generating essays. Snape, meanwhile, finally belongs nowhere. Too good for villains, too cruel for heroes, forever trapped in the parentheses of history. Harry looks up at the portrait of Dumbledore, expecting guidance, but the painted eyes are closed, the mouth a faint smile. Perhaps even wisdom needs silence now. You feel the tension fade from the air as the boy, now man, finally understands why his enemy became his protector. The tears on his cheek catch the morning light like liquid glass, shimmering with fragments of memory that will never fully belong to him. You think back to the moment Snape whispered "always," a single word that became religion for generations of readers. But in truth, it wasn't a declaration. It was a confession. It meant, I never stopped trying to fix the moment I broke. It's tragic and human, and it's why his story endures. Outside, the war rages on. Inside, two lives finally meet in stillness. You stand there for a long time, realizing the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that never begin. You return to the tower where it all began, the wind whispering through the stones like a voice practicing forgiveness. The night has ended, the war almost over, but Hogwarts still smells faintly of smoke and memory. The stones under your feet seem older now, weary from holding the weight of sacrifice. You stand where Snape once stood, where Dumbledore once fell, and realize the air has changed. It feels lighter, as if grief has burned itself clean. Below, the lake mirrors the morning sky, soft gold blurring into blue, and for a moment, the world looks peaceful in its exhaustion. You close your eyes and imagine the echoes that used to live here. Dumbledore's calm laughter, Snape's measured footsteps, the faint screech of an owl that once carried too much hope in its wings. Everything that happened feels impossibly close, yet safely sealed in time. like the scent of rain after it's gone. You walk along the battlement, tracing the grooves where spells once scorched stone, and think about what it means to survive something like this. Heroes get statues, villains get cautionary tales, but the quiet ones, the ones who acted out of love, or duty, or reluctant mercy, they dissolve into the air, unnamed but necessary. The historians will keep arguing, of course. Was Dumbledore's end his greatest wisdom or his most tragic miscalculation? Did Snape's loyalty redeem him, or just prove how painful redemption really is? The debate will never resolve, and maybe it shouldn't. Some stories are meant to ache forever, to remind the living that understanding isn't the same as peace. The quirky tidbit you recall feels oddly fitting. In the Middle Ages, monks who copied sacred texts would sometimes leave one deliberate mistake per manuscript, believing perfection belonged only to God. Maybe this story needed its own flaw too. A plan too clever, a heart too proud, a death too soon. You smile softly at that thought because imperfection, for all its sorrow, makes things real. The same way a crack in a bell gives it a voice. The wind curls around you again, carrying faint traces of ash and phoenix song. Somewhere far away, Harry is rebuilding, Hermione is cataloging what can be saved, and Ron is learning that laughter is a kind of survival, too. Life, somehow, continues its stubborn routine. Letters are written, trains depart, candles are lit for the fallen. You listen closely, half expecting a voice to break through the quiet. A lesson, a warning, a final clever remark from Dumbledore himself. But there's nothing, just the steady hush of dawn against stone. And yet, in that absence, you hear everything. You take one last look at the place where the light faded and realize it's not haunted. It's healed. The tower stands still, not as a monument to death, but to choice. Every breath of wind through its stones sounds like the whisper of understanding passing from one generation to the next. You step back, letting the silence close behind you, and for the first time, the castle feels at rest. The Phoenix is gone, the war is done, and somewhere, beyond the reach of history, two souls finally share the peace they could never find in life. Harry looks up at the portrait of Dumbledore, expecting guidance, but the painted eyes are closed, the mouth a faint smile. Perhaps even wisdom needs silence now. You feel the tension fade from the air as the boy, now man, finally understands why his enemy became his protector. The tears on his cheek catch the morning light like liquid glass, shimmering with fragments of memory that will never fully belong to him. You think back to the moment Snape whispered always, a single word that became religion for generations of readers. But in truth, it wasn't a declaration. It was a confession. It meant, I never stopped trying to fix the moment I broke. It's tragic and human, and it's why his story endures. Outside, the war rages on. Inside, two lives finally meet in stillness. You stand there for a long time, realizing the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that never begin.